Why I always park near cameras. This actually happened in January of 2014. I was 17 years old at the time. After school, my girlfriend C and I decided to go see a movie at the mall around 10 minutes away from our high school. This mall is relatively small, and my friends and I always used it as a gathering place before we did teenage shenanigans. Because we always met there, we had a habit of parking off to the side of the parking lot, in an area that was generally secluded and was far away from the building, and presumably the cameras. We really did only this because nobody else parked in that area, but today, this was not the case. As C and I exit my beat-up Volvo in the secluded mall lot, a guy who looked to be around his mid-30s exits a station wagon, parked a few rows away. He approached us and offered an awkward hello. I was taken a bit aback, mainly by his stench, dirty clothes, and greasy hair. It was pretty obvious he was living out of his car, but I greeted him back, asking if he needed something. He asked us if we had any money to spare, saying that he ran out of gas and needed to refill so he could go home, even though I was sure he was lying. I just assumed he was a con artist looking for a quick buck. I apologized, saying that all I had was money for a movie and snacks, which was true, and took my girlfriend into the mall thinking nothing of it. After finishing the movie, the second Hobbit movie, it was okay. C and I headed back outside and towards our car. As we were heading out the door, though, C grabbed me and pointed out that the guy's car was still parked, fairly close, seemingly empty. She asked me if we just hang out the mall until it's gone, since it was scaring her a little bit. I readily agreed, not wanting to have another run-in with that unsavory character. This was around 5 p.m., so we went around the mall for around 2 or 3 more hours before heading to the lot to see that his car was finally gone. When we get back in my car, though, one thing is dreadfully apparent: the smell. It was obvious he had been in there fairly recently, and the entire thing reeked of his scent. Needless to say, we rolled down the windows and sped back to the school so C and I could go home. I told my parents about what happened, and they kept me on lockdown for about a month, since he could have seen something in my car to get my name, or at least my last name. I still don't know about his motives, and I'm fairly certain I don't want to. C's instincts probably saved both of our lives that day, and I now park where everyone can see, and check the back seats every time I enter a car. Creepy guy. Let's never meet again. Don't call me. I am a teacher, and a week before my student teaching started, I got these creepy phone calls. At first, they started out maybe once a day, usually at nighttime, and they eventually escalated to about 4 or 5 times a day. Now, when I answered the phone, the guy would mutter, "Is someone there?" I put a blank there because I could never figure out who he was asking for. The first couple calls I received, I basically spent the whole time asking who he was, asking for until I eventually gave up and either hang up or said that no, they were not there. These went on for a long time before I actually started realizing I was getting a ton of calls from the same number. Remember, I just started student teaching and was entirely focused on it. I only noticed my phone was getting overwhelmed with these calls once I started getting them about 4 to 5 times a day. I started getting freaked out by their frequency, and the fact that if I stopped talking to the guy on the phone, he would just stay on the phone and breathe heavily. I don't want to know why. I tried everything I could think of, yelling at him not to call, threatening him with calling the cops, and eventually calling back the number to see if anyone else lived there. Funny thing was, the number he was calling from was a motel in Florida. I lived in Chicago. Talking to the manager, he told me that a number of women had called and complained of the same thing. One day, the phone rang and I just knew it. It was gonna be that guy. I was with my fiancé, and I'd him answer the phone. The guy hung up immediately and didn't bother me again for a long time. These phone calls happened at a very memorable time in my life, right before my student teaching time, when I started getting the phone calls again. I realized that it was basically a year to the date. I struggled with getting the guy to stop calling me until I had my fiancé answer again. To this day, I get the calls every year in early January until I get my fiancé to answer the phone. Then I get to wait for next year. This has been happening for 4 years now. P.S. I have to add, I put this story here to see if anyone else experienced the same thing. The manager said that many women had complained of the same thing. I know it's a long shot, but who knows? Biology creep. My second semester of college started in late January. I go to a 2-year college to start out with, then I transfer. This boy in my biology class requested me on Facebook and I accepted, thinking that it would just be a request and that's it. Not even 10 seconds after I accepted his friend request, he messaged me and I started talking to him, thinking it was just normal. Then things started to get creepy. There came the flood of messages, and not even a week of talking, he professed his love to me. This boy has major issues, and he doesn't trust women because one messed with his mind. He told me his whole life story and how he trusts me, and I politely declined his offer to date. He messages my friend, who is also in our biology class, and talks about me. He gets his friends to message me as well. I have traumatic experiences from my past, so this guy sets a bunch of red flags. He also likes to take his anger out on me and makes me feel bad for him. He asked me where I worked last week and I ignored him. He just keeps on messaging me, and I'm afraid to block him because he might do something even more drastic if I do. He tries to look for me before class, and I did not even go to class today. I'm scared to tell someone, but I don't know what this guy is capable of, you know? He just messages me saying he missed me, and my lab partner said he was looking around for me and appears to be nervous. He is very worried about me and gets angry when I don't show up to class. I'm so scared and paranoid. I don't want to leave my house, and I can barely go on Facebook because he always knows when I'm on and messages me. He also wants to transfer to the same school, and he's changing his major to be with me. I really need someone's advice. Do I go to get help? Am I overthinking? I'm worried about my safety, and I have biology with him this week again for 6 hours, and I don't even want to go. Help. Updates. I want to thank every single person who read this and commented because you all had great suggestions of what I should do. It's nice the people on here are looking out for one another, you know? Yesterday, I had my long day of biology, and the boy mentioned to my friends that he was thinking about dropping the class because he was furious and threatened that I would even think about telling the school. I blocked him on social media and walked in to find that he didn't drop the class at all. I was angry because he strolled in and was talking super loud so I could hear. He was also looking at me as well, but at least kept his distance. Only a couple more months with this guy, then I won't have to see him again, because he is on academic probation and probably won't be allowed to come back due to his poor grades. Everything died down and I hope it stays that way. I also hope this guy gets some serious mental help. I am also keeping my eye on some people he talks to, who are girls, so he doesn't do the same thing to them, or else I will end up telling every professional at school. Bad day to wear hunter boots. This happened a little over 3 months ago in January, and I'm still scared shitless of walking home alone to this day. So, important details first. I live in a fairly populated area and safe part of Toronto, and I go to a university about 20 to 25 minutes away from public transit, not including the 10-minute walk from my house to subway. 10 minutes in the subway, and roughly 10 to 15 more minutes on the bus. I was just starting second semester, and to my utter dismay, all my courses were in the morning, all except for one. It was my Aboriginal Studies class, which was held every Tuesday from 6 to 9 p.m. My professor at the time was known for rarely showing up to class, and instead setting up online classes to make up for her absences, so I often found myself showing up to class, only to find out that it was either cancelled, or it was being held online. I never checked my email. It was a rainy Tuesday night, and as usual, I headed to the university to go to my class. I entered the room and sat there for a good 15 minutes, waiting for everyone else to show up. At that point, I started to notice something was weird. I checked my email from last night to find this. Dear students, unfortunately, I'm still sick from last week. It is really slow going and I'm about 50% improved. But I'm not enough improved to make it to tomorrow's class. We also have gotten a ton of snow where I live and the driveway is blocked. However, I do not want to delay our class schedule. I'm going to hold class online to tomorrow. I'll be sending you a link to access the class. You will be able to access it from anywhere with internet access. There will not be video functionality, but there will be audio and chat text for communications. Please check your email for a follow-up message with a link for our class tomorrow. So, this class ended up being canceled again, and I was too pissed off to follow the link to the online class, so I packed up my shit and decided to go home. I got off the subway around 6:40 p.m., and I started to walk home. It was a 10-minute walk from the subway station, in which I had to walk on the sidewalk, cross the road, turn right, and then turn left again into my condo. Besides, nothing dangerous has ever happened to me before, so I assumed my walk home would be a safe one, as usual. Nothing struck me as very strange or scary until about 3 minutes into the walk, when I heard a man's voice quietly murmur something. I also had earbuds in, so I didn't hear a word and just brushed it off, as someone talking on the phone or something like that. As I took another step now, I heard it again. I took off my earbuds and turned around this time and saw a tall man with an exceptionally large build staring at me and smiling. I stupidly pointed at myself and said, "You talking to me?" And he yelled back, "Yes, you!" while smiling. He quickly turned around and jaywalked the street with his friends. Being paranoid as hell at that moment, I looked on as he seemingly walked in the opposite direction I was heading in, and we were separated by 2 streets. This wasn't enough to ease my worries, though. I was still scared as fuck. I felt it. I knew he crossed the street and that he was likely not to ever bother me again, but something just didn't feel right. My heart started pounding like crazy, and I felt the need to look back every 5 seconds now. I was around 5 minutes away from my house when I noticed just how empty the road was. And the whole neighborhood was not a single person in sight, which added even more to the creep factor. All of a sudden, I had a sensation that could only be described as the hair on the back of my neck standing up. I slowly turned around again. I almost shat my pants. There he was at the edge of the road, standing there. He then started to fucking chase me. It all happened so fast. It took me a second for me to go from, oh my god, how do you even manage to holy shit, run. The guy was way fitter than I initially anticipated, and he was starting to catch up to me. I was absolutely terrified. Even with all the adrenaline pumping throughout my body, I was barely able to sprint in my huge, bulky hunter rain boots. Thankfully, without slipping or falling, I managed to run into my condo lobby. Before he could catch me, I was panting, shaking, and crying, and everyone in the lobby was staring at me. I looked outside the glass walls and saw him stop, look around, and leave when he could not find me. I made one of the security guards walk me to my apartment, and I did not dare to come out of it for the rest of the night. I later figured out when the man first crossed the road, he was watching and following me from the other side of the road, and jaywalked when I saw that I was entering a quieter area where I could easily be isolated. It scared me to think that if I wasn't so overly paranoid that night, he could have easily grabbed me from behind, abducted me, or who knows what, maybe even much worse. So, Mr. Rapist, serial killer, or whatever the hell you are, let's not meet. Truly scared. This happened on January 13th in the year 2006, and I was 17 at the time. It had been a long week at school, and I was especially tired because my sleep schedule wasn't back on track from break, so I went to take a nap, and I got home around 3 p.m. in the afternoon. About 8 p.m. I woke up, and my brother came into my room with his phone signed into his Facebook account. "Why'd you post this?" he asked, showing me the post. At first, still being half asleep, I didn't notice what it said, but then I actually focused onto it. "I'm gonna kill all of you," or something along those lines. I didn't remember writing it, nor would I ever write anything like that. So I checked the timestamp, January 13th at 4:13 p.m. Immediately, I was more awake than I'd ever been before. I got out of bed and took the phone to our mother and told her that I did not post it. I couldn't have posted it. I hadn't even been on Facebook since a few days after school started back up from winter break. She went into my account and changed my password, while I went in on my school assignment computer and changed my Gmail password and added that second step to signing in, where I get the text with a security code. After my mother got everything secure with my Facebook, the hacker then got into my brother's account. He kept posting threats and saying stuff like, I'm the one who scratched. I'm gonna kill you into the side of your car door. That happened a month or so before, and my brother had only seen a hooded figure walking from the car. After a while, my brother decided to go outside and sit near the front door with one of our mother's broken shotguns, telling us that he had fixed it. The creep posted, I see you, and I have a gun too. Just some important information. This was a gated community. How the hell did he get inside? So not only did he want to kill and rape me and my family, but he also had access to the apartments? Our mother then called the police and then sent someone over. The psycho then posted, you think that Popo gonna protect you? I'll kill him too. While the policeman was there. And the threats kept coming and coming and coming, and all I really wanted to do was scream in frustration and fear. My family only went outside when we absolutely had to, or we got stir crazy from being locked inside all day. And then he posted the one thing that truly scared me. I know your daughter leaves for the bus stop in the mornings. I was starting to hyperventilate. Even typing this is making my pulse race, my breathing uneven, my hands shake. I'm usually calm, level-headed female, yet I wanted to go outside and scream at the top of my lungs, leave us the fuck alone. According to the glimpse my brother caught of the hooded figure, who scratched the threat and passed him right before the gun post, this was at least a 6-foot male. I'm female 5'5" and barely reaching 110 pounds. I did not go to school. I may be stupid at times, but I'm not dumb enough to leave the house with some psycho out for my blood, without the ability to take some form of weapon with me, and not have the police called for it. So, survival through Troncy beats education any day. My mother finally got my brother's Facebook secured, and I stayed home from school the next few days, constantly looking over my shoulder whenever I left the house. I finally went back to school and told my best friend about the incident, and she was completely supportive of my reaction. I don't know that this has anything to do with the hacker, but about a month later, me and my sister walked over the short distance to the big lots close by. While we were heading back home, I stopped to tie my shoes and noticed a car parked on the side of the road. When I'm sure they noticed me staring, they drove off and I never saw the car again. I mentioned it to my mother and she made sure not to let us go anywhere alone, unless it was absolutely necessary. We have no clue who this person was, but thankfully we have since moved. Then and there have been no major problems, and I just have to say, psycho Facebook hacker, let's not meet again. Ever. Annual knockings. The first time this incident happened was in January 2012. I remember the date exactly because it was the second Sunday of the year, the 8th. I had been at Pizza Hut with one of my girls, and we had stayed chatting until about 9:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. at night, before we decided to walk home. The route from Pizza Hut to my house is about 10 minutes, which involves walking through the car park, round the back of Pizza Hut, next to a roundabout and a busy main road, before crossing the main road and walking up a path with tall trees on both sides. On the left side of the path is a large Wix. The right side is a business park filled with various different businesses, car garages, corporate offices, etc. My friend doesn't walk this way, so we said our goodbyes and I continued up the path alone. I felt slightly odd on the walk up, but I decided it was because it was late and dark on a cold night. I got home, settled down for bed, and put my TV on. At about midnight, I heard this frantic knocking on the door. Well, more of a banging. I, of course, froze, and the knocking continued for 5 minutes. After it stopped, I didn't dare move. 10 minutes later, it happened again for another 5 minutes. This continued pretty much at 1:30 and again at 1:45 to 1 a.m. when it stopped. I was terrified and left Harry Potter on all night just so I could sleep. The next morning, I told my parents, and my father scolded me for not waking him up. But I genuinely thought if I had moved, an attacker would sense motion in the house, and I'd be putting my family in danger. Fast forward a year later, and I find myself at Pizza Hut with the same friend again. It's some sort of a tradition for us, you know? I thought nothing of the previous year's incident, and got home earlier than usual. Of course, you can guess, the knocking started in the exact same pattern at midnight. I was petrified, and definitely not moving. It was happening 2 years in a row. The next morning, I realized it had been the second Sunday of January once again. It had happened this year, which was a relief for both of us. I, of course, believe in coincidences, but this incident is too strange to happen once at all, to then happen on the same day of a year, 2 years in a row, and be a coincidence. There is no rational explanation that I can think of, but if anyone can offer one, it would be appreciated. I am, however, just glad my family and I are safe. The Shitbag Bandit. 2016 seems to have a pretty interesting year for a lot of people I know, myself included. By far the most bizarre and truly frightening experience occurred in January of 2016. Now to set the stage, let me explain a bit of background on myself and the situation. I am a 23-year-old female, 22 at the time of the story, living in a home I own together with my boyfriend of 5 years. We have lived together in this home for about 3 years and still currently reside there. We live in a pretty decent suburban area of a medium-sized Midwestern town. I have lived in this area my entire life, but my boyfriend, we'll call him Joe, is originally from the Middle East and has relocated here for school. With Joe's family being back in the overseas area, he would often go home over school breaks to visit them for a couple weeks or even over a month at a time, leaving me home alone for the duration. I usually never worried about being alone, though, as I grew up with a police officer for a father, who actually lives only 5 minutes from Joe and I's home. Now, on this particular January day, I was at home alone. My Joe was about halfway through a month-long trip overseas for the holiday break. He wouldn't be home again until closer to the beginning of the next semester. I had woken up at around 9 a.m. to get ready to go catch a movie with my dad. I left around 10 a.m. and headed to my father's house across town. After visiting for a bit, we left to have an early lunch and catch our movie. Forgive me, I forgot what we saw. By the time we finished, we didn't arrive back to his house until about 5 p.m. I spent about an hour and a half catching up with my stepmom before deciding it was time to head home. Now, at my home with Joe, we only owned a parrot, and my childhood dog still lives with my dad and stepmom. That evening, I decided to take my dog with me for a couple nights for some added security and company while being home alone. My stepmom had also sent with me a couple bags of, food items, as parents do. I packed the dog and bags in the car, and we made it the quick trip back to my home. Now, being January, it was already dark outside at 6:30 when I arrived home, and the remnants of snow still covered the grass and patches of the street. I got out of my car and went around the passenger side, letting my door out and grabbing my bags, making my way to the door. I set the bags down on the welcome mat as I fidgeted with my keys. At this point, I hit my first red flag. My front door has a deadbolt as well as a regular lock that can be locked from inside before leaving. Typically, when only leaving for a few hours, I would simply twist the lock shut and close the door, not taking any time to fuss with the deadbolt from outside. I knew for a fact that was exactly what I had done that morning, so I was completely shocked when I unlocked the bottom lock, went to open the door, and discovered that the deadbolt was securely locked. A brief wave of panic flooded over me, knowing at this point that someone had definitely been, or was still inside, my house. After thinking for a moment now, I decided that the most likely of option was that Joe had come home early to surprise me and was inside the house. He and I had a conversation a few days prior about him being really ready to come home, and he had expressed that it would be too expensive to change his flight, so he would be staying the rest of the trip. Maybe that wasn't the case. Maybe this was a big joke. So at this point, He was not due home for over a week. Still unsure of what the heck was going on, I put my dog back in my car for fear of the little guy being hurt by the unknown person inside my house, and ran back to finish unlocking the deadbolt. At this point, I also noticed that my mail had been taken from my mailbox and placed on the chair we have next to our front door. I was extremely alarmed at this point, but also operating on what I can only describe as a mixture of fear, anger, and adrenaline. Upon unlocking the door, I went inside and began to try and process what was going on when I first entered. I couldn't tell much of the situation. To give you an idea of how my house is laid out, I would describe it as a small split level. This means that upon first entering, you walk into a small front entryway that leads back to the laundry room and garage. A set of stairs off to the right of the entryway takes you upstairs into a living room, which flows into the kitchen. Another set of stairs off the living room takes you upstairs into a hall, which splits off into 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. This layout means that not much of the house is visible upon first entering. I stood frozen in the entryway for a good minute, listening silently for any type of sound. I heard nothing. I called out to Joe once, then twice, then a third time, still hoping this was all just a big mistake. From the entryway, I could see one of Joe's coats thrown at the top of the stairs and a couple other clothing articles on the couch at the opposite end of the living room. I went up into the living room and began to notice an overpowering stench. It smelled kind of like what I imagine shit and vomit smell like. After baking in the sun for a few hours, the smell immediately struck me as some type of bodily excretion, but nothing I could place. Thoughts began to swirl in my head about Joe perhaps getting sick on his flight and coming home, tossing his coat off and running upstairs to vomit. As I'm trying to piece it all together, I head upstairs to check every single room, desperate to get to the bottom of this mystery. I check the guest bathroom, and of course my first glimpse of the source of the odor. The light is on. The toilet is clogged with shit and toilet paper. The hand towels are smeared with shit and spread across the floor. And there is a small, clear trash bag filled with what I can only make out as to be more shit-covered toilet paper. I then ran into the master bedroom. Checking the master bedroom too, no sign of Joe. I then ran directly across the hall into the first guest room. There, I noticed a couple drawers tossed open, and immediately understood that this definitely wasn't Joe. I called him over and over, desperate to make sure he was okay. Finally he answered. I shrieked into the phone, asking him where he was and if he was okay. He explained that he was still overseas, thousands of miles away, just as we had talked about. Well then someone has been in our house, I screamed. During my time on the phone with Joe, which was probably only a minute, but seemed so much longer, I checked the entire house again. Continuing first upstairs, I checked the second spare bedroom, which at the time did not have a light fixture hooked up. The entire room was illuminated by a small battery-powered nightlight that cast a green glow out from the floor in the middle of the room. Around the nightlight, my personal documents were scattered about. Birthday cards, letters, bills, bank statements, you name it. At this point, convinced this was a burglary, I got off the phone with Joe and called the police. And then my dad. My dad arrived long before the police. Who made a thorough sweep of the house. Not much had been stolen, though, but far more disturbing damage had been done. Upon closer look, I found smears and pieces of human feces in almost every room of my house. Smears on the carpet in each bedroom, smears on the couch, smears on the kitchen sink and floor, smears in front of the washer and dryer, smears in the entryway. Literal human shit all over my house. Drawers have been rifled through, but I didn't find much missing other than some of Joe's clothing and a spare set of keys to my car. Before the cops even arrived, my dad found footprints in the snow on the deck, leading to and from the sliding glass kitchen door. Apparently it had been left unlocked at some point, I believe by some cigarette-smoking friends of mine who had been going in and out the day prior. I was actually pretty glad he didn't have to smash the door to break inside. We discovered food out on the counter in the kitchen, and what we believed to be the burglar's setup for smoking meth. We also discovered a puddle of frozen piss on the deck steps, directly in 2 snowy footprints, making me believe this dude pissed down his legs on the way out, possibly scared of me coming home. All this help piecing together the puzzle was nice, but I still couldn't figure out why this man had taken it upon himself to shit all over my house. Then my dad found it. Inside the clear trash bag in the bathroom was a worn-out, shit-covered colostomy bag. This fucker had been free shitting out of his stoma all over my house. by the time the police arrived. My dad was pretty much able to tell them it was more likely a homeless meth head that found his way inside to clean up, eat, and steal whatever he could hide on his person. We filed a police report, cleaned up the mess, and called it a night. My dad also provided me with a club to lock the car up for the time being, in an attempt to deter the burglar if he came back for my car. I slept with several knives within arm's reach that night. Now fast forward a couple days. Joe had switched his flight actually, and he wanted to come back. He was already homebound, rattled by what I went through and the feeling of being helpless to protect me. During this time after the break-in, I found a getaway bag filled with bank statements, change, old electronics, and basically anything this guy thought of was of value. This led me to believe that the burglar was still inside at the time I came home, and probably escaped out the back, while I put the door in the car up front, and came back to unlock the door. Shaken by this fact, and the sheer absurdity of the break-in, I was more than relieved to have Joe back home. I felt like my nightmare was just about to be put to rest. I continued to secure my car at night, and we spent our days researching home security systems and preparing to head back to school in just a week. Fast forward a bit more, and it is the first week of class. Both Joe and I study at a university that is more than an hour away from home. I've been leaving my car locked, but without the club on the steering wheel at school. This false security carried over into my time at home, and only a week after the break-in, I forgot to put the club on my steering wheel one night. Heading out the door for school the next morning, I was shocked to see my car gone from the driveway. I yelled for Joe and we called the police. Motherfucker came back for my car, after all. At this point, Joe shares that he had heard a sound similar to my car unlocking one day the previous week when he was home alone, but nothing of it. After searching the surrounding areas, not to mention many of our neighbors have the same car style, we were furious. The break-in had left its scars and damages, but we still felt lucky that the burglar wasn't able to get away with much. But now he had my car after filing a police report. Joe and I drove around to the seediest part of town, and pretty much everywhere in between, searching for my little silver Honda. After a couple of days of no luck, I received a call late one night from the police department. They had found my car. Oh, you mean they found it when the culprit ran from police? Oh, and it's totaled? My excitement turned into a mixture of emotions, sadness and anger, but also joy that the asshole himself had been caught. I learned in time that he hit 2 other cars in his attempt to flee police, and that one woman had been ejected from her car, but all parties were unharmed. My car was gone, but she brought the shitbag bandit into the hands of justice. After a couple days, I received a call from the police once again, asking if I knew John Setter. The name was familiar, a guy my own age, and I actually graduated from high school with. He was nothing more than an acquaintance, but he definitely knew of me and I knew of him. His story was that he was indeed homeless, and had recognized my house as being the residence of another guy he knew from high school. This person did live at my house at one point, but hadn't lived there for at least 10 years now. Regardless, he had come in with the intent of showering, eating, and stealing whatever he could. I learned that he had a long history of run-ins with the law. I understood that people that knew him knew that he was the type who would lie and steal from his own family, explaining why he was on the streets. This also explained the colostomy bag, which seemed out of place on a 23-year-old. We're pretty sure he was stabbed and shot at some point, causing him to need the bag. I have pictures of the house and the shit for proof if anyone is interested. Some days I can't believe what happened or wrap my mind around how violated it made me feel. Coming home to a house covered in shit isn't something you forget overnight. John, or as I like to call him, the shit bag bandit, is locked up for a good length of time now, and I'm hopeful that I've moved far away when he's released. Shitbag bandit, please, let's not meet again. Friendly to too friendly. The story happened back to me in January. Now I work at a TJ Maxx and sometimes I have to work at night and have no way to get home, as I don't have a driver's license yet. So I have to ask for rides, and for a few years Mike would drive me home with his girlfriend, who was a very sweet woman, but they have, before this happened, left him. We would talk about simple things, and during those years, John was a nice man who looked out for me. His girlfriend left the TJ Maxx and the drive home stopped. This is where this story became a creeper one. One night, I'm on my 15-minute break, and there is a Rite Aid not even around the corner from where I work, so I go get something to drink and walk back over. Then I hear Mike's voice calling my name and turn to him. Now, I was startled because he was standing in a darkened area, and I should have told him I had to get to work, but at first, his encounter with me was harmless. I didn't even see him. I said hello to him and he asked for a hug. Since I knew him to be a good man, I didn't think anything of it, so I hugged him. Then he proceeds to kiss me on my neck and sucked on it like an octopus. He also smelled like unwashed body and urine. He let me go, wishing me a Merry Christmas in January. Anyways, I walk in and rub my neck, and later I wash my coat to get the smell out and told someone about what he did. I was shocked. No one thought it was strange. I felt so violated over it. Then after that, he would come into the store every Sunday and try to talk to me. And because I was in the jewelry area, where I'm literally stuck in a boxed-in area, if you've ever been to TJ Maxx before, he was always talking overtly friendly and asked me if I still live with my parents. I told him I did. Thinking on it now, that probably kept anything truly dangerous from happening to me. He would say things about having a side of his bed empty, weird things like that. He would also stare at me like I was meat. Needless to say, I didn't say much to him or stood too close. After a while, I would hide if I could see him, and told the managers all about him. They kept an eye out on him when he came into the store. I haven't seen him since, really, and nothing else has ever happened to me with him, thank God. So, Mike, let's not meet again. Note, I am 26 years old and female. Silver Prius and black SUV. Hello Reddit, this is my first post on here, so sorry if this is a bit short, but I will post more often sometimes. So anyways, it is April now, and this happened in January. I live about a half mile from my local elementary school, and sometimes walk there even though I am in high school. So I decided to walk there, and it was a good walk. Cold as hell because I live in Northeast USA, but good. I got across the street from the school, and was going to walk across the street and around the school until, that is, I saw a silver Prius and a black SUV just sitting there, presumably with people inside. I waited for probably around 3 minutes to see if they would go away. Neither one moved an inch, so then I weighed my options for about 2 more minutes, and decided to turn around and go back home. When I got a good distance away, I freaking booked it out of there, until I got tired and walked a bit, and then started running again. So, when I round the corner back onto my street, I was walking by the fire station, and I swear I saw the same silver Prius parked in the lot there. I wasn't too worried though, because my house was right up the street, and there were a couple of people outside. I made it home safely, and when I got there, my mom had come home from work. So my parents were home, both of them. I told them both what happened, and they said I did the right thing by coming back home, but that my imagination was just overactive, right? And now that I think about it, they were probably right. But regardless, creepy Prius and SUV drivers, let's not meet. Ever. True accounts. The Winter Man. Okay, so I used to live next to a homeless shelter in downtown Boston. And after living there for a few months, I got accustomed to how things ran down there. At dusk, the shelter would open up and they would fill the beds. Whoever was outside of the building when the beds filled up was not let inside, and unfortunately had to go it alone that night. There were usually around 10 people left, but some nights there could be 25 people outside. So all that being said, my late night encounters have been regrettably frequent, and I usually end up not being able to sleep. One encounter in particular I will never forget. It was pretty late that night. I was walking back from my friend's apartment in the North End and was trying to make it back quickly because it was fucking freezing. Like mid-January in New England can be really brutal, and Boston has its fair share of wind tunnels. When I left the apartment, it had just started to snow. It was well past midnight on a weekday, and the city was barren. By the time I had made it halfway, there was already a half foot of snow. My mark was the 7-Eleven in the theater district. Once I saw that fluorescent green and white sign, I was there. My apartment was about a block away. So I trucked along with my head down to avoid the sharp and cold winds that were there. I turned down one of the more major streets on my way home. When the wind picked up like a banshee, I decided to take the alleyways to avoid the wind because I felt like I could break my nose off. So off I go, into the alleyway where the wind was non-existent. There was even heat coming out of the vents, behind buildings, and I really thought I made the right choice. Not 5 seconds into the alleyway, I hear something in front of me followed by a quiet laughter. However, the laughter didn't stop and just grew louder until this guy stepped out from behind a caged generator. This guy was straight out of a nightmare, tall, at least 6'8", and skinny to the point where he could be starved. He was completely bald and wore a ripped blue sweater and walked with his arms contorted, his fingers flicking vigorously, and this black shit all over his mouth. He mumbled something, then laughed, mumbled, then laughed, and continued. I couldn't hear what he was saying, and I don't think it would have made any sense regardless. He wasn't looking at me either. This guy was in his own world and felt like I was standing there for way too long, so I decided to leave with haste. I pivoted and sped walked back the way I came. I exited the alley and turned down the frozen hell of a street again. Halfway in, my face couldn't take it anymore, and I flipped around and started to walk with my back against the wind, checking periodically for my turn. As I reached the end of the street, I walked quickly backwards, still to avoid the cold. My hood was on and I had no peripherals. Suddenly, the guy walks right to the left of me, an arm's length away, doing his same routine. The guy was barefoot in a snowstorm and made eye contact with everything but my eyes, so I turned and booked it with my head down. I knew the way. I just wanted to see that 7-Eleven, and eventually I did. I ran inside to get warm and catch my breath. The Indian guy at the counter said something about the weather, but I just kept my head down. When I caught my breath, I said goodbye to him and left. With my hood up, I walked to my apartment building, and before I reached the steps, I looked over my shoulder, and there he was, standing under the glow of the 7-Eleven sign. He looked at me, the wind kicking up the snow all around him. I turned to put the key in the door, and he started towards me as fast as he could. He had a serious kink to his step, and I had already opened the door. I was in. I headed up the stairs and shut my window. I didn't bother looking outside because I just wanted to forget it. I never saw him again.